Hello there, welcome back to The Closet Historian and back to my sewing room for another project today. Today I wanted to take the leftover fabric from the carmine gown and make something a little bit more wearable to take with me up on my upcoming journeys out to California and perhaps wear while visiting Calico Ghost Town, to wear calico, my quilting cotton that I'm having stand in for calico in my carmine gown, to wear that fabric at Calico. Something about it is almost like a dad joke, kind of punny to me, and I think it would be fun. So since I had about 2 yards-ish of fabric left over after finishing the carmine gown trimmings, I thought I would take the leftover fabric and try and cobble together something short-sleeved yet still Edwardian inspired to wear out in the desert. Let's jump on over to the blue patterning table of doom and I'll show you what I came up with. So to begin, I will take my all-in-one sleeve bodice back and front here as a starting point, just to make something I've made before here on the channel, which is a button-back blouse, but with a curved yoke and stand collar in the front. I'm not even going to do a yoke on the back, just on the front. Just a little bit of an Edwardian inspired top pattern, but not with... Originally I wanted big billowy sleeves, or peasanty sleeves, perhaps. But I'm planning on wearing this at Calico Ghost Town and on my way from Vegas, or from LA to Las Vegas on my trip here, and it's going to be 100 degrees, if not a little bit warmer than that, so I decided against long sleeves for this particular top and went ahead and did the all-in-one short sleeve here just to avoid overheating, although I do believe that actually long sleeves are recommended for in the desert because to protect your skin. But I won't be out in the desert a lot that day. I'll be going vintage shopping in Las Vegas for most of the day, but I am planning on possibly stopping into Calico Ghost Town just for a fun thing on the way out of LA out to Nevada. So we'll see how it goes. But here I've just drawn in my curved yoke. You can see I just drew on a curve about 5 inches down from the original neckline. That's what's going on here. And then I drew 2 red lines up from the apex into that curved line where I will move the dart fullness into gathering along the yoke. This is a very simple modification, and I will need to add seam allowance along the yoke, but you'll see me do that in just a moment here. Let me go ahead and cut all this out. This top is going to end at the waist, so some people would consider that a crop top, but because all of my trousers and skirts are high-waisted, to me this is a full-length shirt. Of course you can make your shirts as long as you should like in life, but this is just using my bodice pattern that ends at my waist because I don't need this shirt to be longer than my waist. But I just cut the yoke off here, but of course anytime I cut the pattern apart and plan on sewing it back together, I will need seam allowance, so that is what I'm adding on here to the bottom of the yoke pattern here. I always thought it was weird, like yoke, Y-O-K-E, not Y-O-L-K. Not like an egg yolk. Not a yolk, but a yolk. Strange thing. Don't know where that word comes from. Could have looked it up, but I'm on a time crunch, okay? Who knows what's happening? I have so much sewing to get done, and yet I still added on this project because I'm just silly like that. But I just really liked this carmine fabric. I had a little bit left over, and I thought I won't be able to wear the carmine gown out in the Old West, but I could wear a Old West inspired top made out of the carmine fabric. And since I had a little bit left over, I thought this would be a fun way to incorporate it into my upcoming adventures. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm not even sure where I am. I could be this could be the day that I upload this on a Thursday. Oh no, I'm on my way back, I think. So I will have already worn this top, hopefully, out in Calico. We'll see. It just looks like a fun place to stop. It's sort of a Knott's Berry Farm, but in the desert. I don't know. I haven't been to Knott's Berry Farm in a very long time. Here I am again. I've just filled in those... I moved the dart. I forgot to even mention. I closed the waist dart and moved it into the neckline. You've seen me do a lot of stuff like this lately. So I closed the waist dart and opened it up into the neckline, and now I'm adding on seam allowance. So hopefully, while I was rambling, you were watching what I was doing. But you can see here what is happening. And this all gets sewn back onto the yoke, and this gets gathered down into the yoke. So I'm just moving that dart fullness, closing at the waist. Now I have a smooth waist area, and the same amount of fullness has been opened up into the yoke, above the bust like that. It's just, again, dart manipulation, but just using it in different ways. Here I'm adding on a 1/4 inch at the waist. I'm going to do that to the front here and the back, just to give myself a little bit more room at the waist, because this is a top instead of a dress with a zipper up the back or anything. I like to have a little bit more ease in a shirt. Here, to be able to draft my stand collar, I'm just measuring what my front neckline is for future reference, which is 4 1/4 inches. So just writing that down. And then I can go ahead and start working on the back, which is going to be even simpler. So for the back of this, I'm going to take my all-in-one sleeve bodice back. Again, I drafted the all-in-one version of my blocks here on the channel, or showed how I did this recently, so I will put a card up to that video here if you want to see how to take a regular bodice block and make an all-in-one bodice block like this one. But I'm going to keep my dart in the back here. Here's my center back here. I usually have about 5/8 seam allowance in the back of this for doing a zipper. I'm going to use that 5/8 as my overlap for my buttons back here, and then add on 2 inches as a facing to face that area. Again, I'm adding on a 1/4 inch here at the waist, at the side seam, just like I did on the front. And then I will go ahead and cut this out. And then I just need to draft the stand collar pattern for this. I'm going to have a 1.5 inch high, or 1.25 inch high, maybe 1.25, I can't remember. We'll see in a second. Inch stand collar for this, just something a little bit Edwardian. And I might even add a little bit of lace to the yoke here. What? I know. Obviously, if I could take pictures of this outfit, although I'll be up by myself, so if I get someone to take a picture of me, I would put, if I were to title this blog post, because I like to be slightly punny and cheeky, I would probably title the post American Gothic. You know, like the famous painting is called American Gothic, because it's going to be kind of a Gothic-ish shirt, and I'll be standing in the middle of the desert in California, you know? I like to have a dad joke now and again. In addition to my Hawaiian dad shirts, I also enjoy a dad joke. It's true. But here I am drafting the collar pattern. Again, I'm just going to square off a line here for rectangle, add a 1/2 inch seam allowance even, come out 4.25 inches, and actually the back of this was 4.25 inches too, so 4.25 inches, 4.25 inches again. And normally you come up this 1/2 inch in the front of a stand collar, but I didn't know if you came up the same 1/2 inch if you're doing this where it opens in the back. I think you can, and I think it would still work. I just went that curve in general and just made this straight, which I think works, but I think it would have worked better if I had involved that curve. I couldn't find anyone telling me. I mean, I Googled very quickly. I did not do extensive research on this to see like if the collar opens in the back, if you still do that little tip up with the collar. Hopefully you know what I mean. But this little quick stand collar here just will fit onto my shirt. You'll see how that gets sewn on later. It's all very clean on the inside, which is nice. But here's my leftover carmine fabric. Now, I do have about maybe a little over 2 yards left, actually, but it's narrow, so you can see how narrow it is here. I'm not going to be able to cut this on the lengthwise grain. I'll have to end up cutting this on the cross grain because I was cutting long strips to do the pleats on the underskirt, so I don't have full yardage, 2.5 yards left, but probably if you added this all together, it would be around 2.5 yards maybe. So you could probably make that gown, if you didn't do any pleated trimming, for 12, 13 yards total, but I had bought 15 just because that's how much comes on a bolt of quilting cotton. So I just bought 1 bolt of quilting cotton, which was, you get like bulk discounts for these kinds of things, usually from quilting fabric shops. So that's how that worked out for me. So I do still have a little bit left over after this, but again, it's just narrow. So you can see here I'm folding it and cutting these on the crosswise grain. Crosswise does technically, I think, stretch a little bit more than lengthwise grain does. It's a little bit less stable, but it's fine. Both crosswise and lengthwise grain are what I usually line things up on, unless, again, I'm doing something special with stripes or patterns, or for some reason I'm cutting something on the bias. Doesn't usually happen, except for bias tape, of course, which I do cut out all the time. Let me just cut this out of our carmine fabric here, and I'll cut out the backs as well. Not many pieces for this project. It was a quick project. I think this took me around, ooh, I want to say like 5 hours to sew, which is pretty fast. And I didn't actually film every single step of this just because I am in the mad dash to get a lot of projects sewn before I leave on my trip, because even though, as we know, I have plenty of clothes, I don't have a lot of like, what's the version of me in the wilderness, which I won't be like camping or be in the wilderness much, but you know, what I need some like glam adventure clothes that aren't too glam. So not my silk safari blouses, but something cotton that can be washed. It's going to be hot out there. So I needed a few more pairs of trousers in my arsenal, in my wardrobe here. So I've been making lots of trousers lately. Sorry I haven't been showing you that. I've just been using the same trouser pattern that you've seen me use here on the channel before, which I will put a link up to that video here. This is my 1946, I think it was 46 maybe? 1940s trouser pattern that I used one time that I had to correct a little bit. And I've just been using this to make all kinds of different stuff. I've kind of been using this as a trouser block pattern, which we can experiment with perhaps later this year or next year, making trouser patterns from scratch. But because this pattern works so well for me, I've just been using this, honestly. So, you know, every once in a while I have a commercial pattern that works, but again, this is a commercial pattern from the 1940s that I had to modify and fix because it was messed up. So is this me using a pattern, or is this me using a semi-drafted pattern? It's hard to say. I'm just cutting a strip here that is going to be 3 inches wide and around 33-ish inches long, just to give myself a little bit of room. Again, this is just cut on the lengthwise grain actually here, on the edge of a piece of fabric, just because I want to add a waistband onto this top, which is kind of a strange thing, but it makes it feel a little bit more, again, like a turn-of-the-century bodice or shirtwaist as opposed to a modern top, I guess? I don't know. Plenty of modern tops have a waistband, but this just felt like a nice thing to have on this. It makes it a little bit longer because, of course, this would end right at my natural waistline otherwise, so this helps give me a tiny bit to tuck in, perhaps. But really, this is just going to end, like, if I don't care if a sliver of midriff shows. Scandalous, I know. So it doesn't bother me, but you'll see what this looks like in the end, and it's plenty, it's not really a crop top on me, it's a full-length top on me because everything I wear is so high-waisted, like I said. But here I am sewing my darts. I had taken footage, or at least I thought I had, of me like marking and pinning the darts and talking a little bit, or showing a little bit about where I needed to gather on the front piece, but for some reason my camera didn't record that bit, so we're missing it here. You'll just have to trust me. But here, from pin to pin, I'm putting in 2 lines of gathering stitching across the center front of the front of this blouse, where I had opened up those darts. Instead of sewing them as darts, I'm sewing it in as gathering. So it's all just smoothed off. 2 lines of large stitches here, so I can gather that down and connect it to the yoke. You'll see that in a moment. And here I have my collar. I did go ahead and put interfacing on one side of this collar. I cut out 2 of my collar, and one side of it is interfaced, the side that's facing the machine right now. But right sides together, I'm sewing this, again, leaving the needle down in the corner, and then turning and sewing down, stopping a 1/2 inch before the end, just because I need that 1/2 inch along the neck side edge to sew this onto the garment later. But here's my little collar. I can clip the corners on this, turn that right side out, and press it like so. If you wanted a really stiff stand collar that would totally stand up, even better than this one, then you could interface both sides, but I just didn't bother for this. I wanted it to be quite comfortable because, again, I'm going to be wearing this on a very hot day, if all goes according to plan. I had a couple of people say that they really didn't like this fabric, which, you know, everyone each to their own in life. But I had picked it out a long time ago, actually. I've been thinking about it a long time, trying to decide which fabric to use for my carmine gown, and I just kept coming back to this one. I really like it. And then I went through my entire button stash, trying to figure out what buttons to use on this. That's what that was. But here I will press my darts towards the center back here. That's what this is. Set that aside. And then I'm going to serge the raw edges of all this because I want this to be something I can toss in the wash. And luckily I had pre-washed all this fabric for making the carmine gown, so it had already been pre-washed even. So it's good to go on that front. But here's the front of this. Of course, cut on the fold here. So the center front was cut on the fold, I should say. So it looks kind of wide here, but that's because all this needs to be gathered down. But before I can do that, I'm going to run everything but the neckline edges and the sleeve hems through the serger here. I'm going to hem the sleeves by turning them twice, so I'm not going to worry about anything fraying there, but everything else I'm going to go ahead and serge so that it doesn't fray. But here my gathering stitching along the center front of this garment. I can just pull that down. I am going to find the center real fast here so I can match it up with the center of my yoke here. Like so, just put a pin in that, literally. Then I can line this up to this curvy yoke. Again, just pulling my gathering stitching down. This is not that much gathering. You could add more to something like this. I should have taken this as an opportunity to show you how, honestly. But again, we are in a mad dash to get everything done. This week I have to finish totally 3 videos, which is a bit ambitious of me to film this video and edit this video, plus my Patreon video, and plus edit another video for while I'm gone. So it's a lot of stuff in combination with, you know, packing and planning and making sure my cat's okay, even though I'm leaving her for 2 weeks, which is very scary for me. I was very excited about this trip I'm on currently, except for that then my cat got sick and now I'm just anxious, and the trip isn't really cancelable. And I've been looking forward to it all year too, but like it would cost a lot of money to cancel my trip at this point. And one of my friends is supposed to meet me out there for part of my trip, and she would have to cancel her flights and blah blah blah. So I can't really cancel my trip, but it does mean I will be anxious the entire time that my cat will be more sick by the time I get back than she is now. But for those of you who are wondering, she is doing okay. She doesn't know she's sick, you see. She's a very leaky little cat, so she notices that, like, her bladder doesn't work. But other than that, she still wants to sit in patches of sun and sit on my lap and purr and go outside and, like, kill a butterfly. So she seems pretty fine. Like, sleepier than usual, but she's old, so, you know, she can sleep all the time if she wants to. Anyway, my yoke is now sewn to my shirt. This is how that looks once it's sewn up. And I actually did put a line of top stitching on the front of this to hold the seam allowance up into the yoke area. And then I will sew down a little bit of lace edging on top of this seam here too. So that stitching will be covered by this lace here, which I will sew on again just by machine. Of course, you could do as much lace work and embroidery and whatever as you want to do on something like this. Or do a contrast fabric for the yoke, or put a layer of lace over the yoke before you sewed it to the rest. Of course, this whole thing would be very pretty if you made it in like sheer black cotton with a layer of like eyelet lace over the yoke, or vice versa. Made it in eyelet cotton and made the yoke plain, or like did embroidery of like a spider web on this circular yoke. You could get very, very creative with this kind of thing. But I'm just putting on this little tiny row of lace as my extra little embellishment detail here. And again, you could do the yoke on the back too, which I didn't even do this time because I'm doing this quickly. This is my idea of, like, you know, a very fast project. So, alas, here we are. But now that the yoke on the front is all finished, I can go ahead and sew my shoulder seams and side seams together. And for the side seams of this, I've had a lot of people ask me about, like, how do I deal with the fact that this little curve here needs to be trimmed, or like clipped. This curve needs to be clipped for it to lay smoothly, but then of course it would fray. One of the ways I do that is I taper down to 1/4 inch here just at that curve, and then I don't clip it. So that's one way to do it. And pressed open, it looks like this. It works pretty well. The other way to do that is just to put an extra line of stitching in there and clip it anyway, or to fully line the garment is probably the best, safest way. But there's many ways to get around that kind of thing, but I really quite often use this just like narrowing down to 1/4 inch right over that curve and then not clipping it. Meh. One of those bending the rules things situations again. Then I'm folding back and pressing my fold backs back here, my facings, all-in-one facings, for where my buttons and buttonholes will go on the back of this top. We'll see how I end up buttoning this up, all on my own out there on the road. People always ask me that, how do you button the backs of these button back blouses? Well, normally I live here and I don't live alone, so I find a person to help me button them up. But since I'll be on the road, I will have to button this one by myself, so we'll see how I do. But I just did interface the inside of this side because this is the side the buttonholes will go on, so I wanted a little bit of extra stability where the buttonholes will go. Although my buttonhole machine from 48 will totally make a buttonhole in something very lightweight, which is nice. But before I do those buttonholes, I'm going to go ahead and put my collar on here. So again, I'm finding the center front of my center front, like so. And the center of my collar here. And then I will sew the interfaced side down, right sides together, to my shirt. And again, this is a very straight collar and a very curved neckline, but you just ease them together like so, pinning everything in place all the way to the other end here. And then stitch it at, it doesn't matter if it's bunching a little bit, as long as it's not bunching underneath where the needle will be. So just a 1/2 inch down needs to be smooth, but the rest of it can be bunchy, that's fine. You're going to clip this curve eventually anyway, and that's why it's doing that. But I will just pin everything in place, take it over here to the machine, and stitch that down at that 1/2 inch, like I said. Only this little 1/2 inch needs to be smooth, really. Try not to get any puckering here. Doing my best not to, at least. Kind of wiggling the other side. You can see my hand on the right-hand side of the screen. I'm just kind of wiggling the fabric to make sure that nothing's getting caught or pinched underneath while this is being sewn on. Like so. All right. Collar is on. Now again, I need to clip this seam that I just sewed for the collar because the neckline edge is so curved that this is a very curvy curve that you need to clip. Otherwise it will not lay smoothly. And look at all these pins everywhere. A sprinkling of pins. But now again, I'm just going to press all my seam allowance up into the collar area, like so. And then I will fold down this inside edge of the collar, fold it into place, and you could hand stitch it down, but this time I'm going to top stitch it, which is by machine, which is very fast. I quite like to use top stitching. I know some people think it makes things look homemade. I don't know, I think it makes things look nice and finished. Perhaps this is a subject of some contention that I am unaware of. But I'm just going to pin this, again, folding everything Smooth and nice here along this back edge, back neckline edge. Folding everything inside. Hopefully you can see what's happening here. This is how I like to finish my colors. And again, it will be all completely finished nice and smooth inside here. The only thing that won't be finished is that seam of the front yoke, but that's okay. I don't think it'll get a ton of stress. Probably would hand wash this garment even anyway, or like wash it on delicate, just because that's how I usually wash blouses. But I could throw this in the dryer even because I pre-washed and dried this fabric. But here I am over on the machine, top stitching that collar down from the outside of the blouse here. And I'm going to go all the way along the neckline edge where it connects to the shirt, but then also around the corners at the back neckline edge and up along the top of the neckline too, just to finish off my top stitching nicely. Stitching. I can't speak anymore. This is the second voiceover I've recorded today, and therefore my voice isn't working very well anymore. But you know, doing what we can here. Making it work. Trying to make sure that you have content even while I'm gone. Because you know, that's how YouTube works. And back over here on the ironing board, I'm going to make the little waistband for this top. So I'm just marking my waist measurement on this so I know not to stretch this much so that everything fits down the way it needs to be, I guess. Because we all know I don't use a lot of stay stitching or things like that. So measuring even is almost, more than I normally would put up with. But now I can pin right sides together, this little straight strip along the bottom of my top here. Make sure everything fits down into that. Like so. Lots of pins. We know me. I use lots of pins and I sew over them. Living dangerously. It's true. But now that that is sewn on, I again can kind of finish this the same exact way I finished the collar. So I'm just going to press the seam allowance towards the waistband, then finish this like a waistband because that's what it is. Instead of at the top of a skirt, it's at the bottom of a top. Same idea. And just make sure that this is all smooth and nice. And again, you could hand stitch this down on the inside of here. But again, I'm going to top stitch it the exact same way that I just top stitched the collar, because then it will match. The collar and the waistband will look the same. And that makes sense to me. I also did use black thread for most of this, as opposed to rust colored thread. So it's a little bit of a contrast thread, but only if you were up close. And I ended up going with these kind of antique silver metal buttons for this. And I wanted to concentrate the buttons a little bit towards the bottom of the top, because across the back you don't really need buttons on a shirt like this. It'll stay closed if you have the rest of it buttoned up, and those are the hardest ones to reach anyhow, so making it work. But I was just deciding where I wanted my buttons. I want one on the waistband here, and then one up here on the collar, and then I can decide where I need the other ones across the bottom back of this. So I did the other buttons on the main body of the shirt vertically, and the ones on the collar and waistband horizontally. And I just did those with my button holder. Once again, forgot to get footage of that. Bummer. But the last thing to do for this top, other than sew the buttons on, was to hem the sleeves. So I'm just going to do that by hand, actually. After all that machine sewing, I end up finishing the sleeve hems by hand. So I'm just turning this twice, 1/4 inch by eye, not by measuring it. Ironing that into place, and then I will actually end up felling these down instead of slip stitching it, because it just seemed like it would be faster. And here is my finished calico top here with its higher neckline. It turned out very like 1970s prairie meets 1980s goth in a sort of 1940s inspired patterned shirt with my 1880s inspired gown fabric. So, it's a mismatch of all the eras here. It turns out to be just kind of a slightly history-bounding / retro top for me to wear with my high-waisted black garments here. Of course, I could wear this with other colors as well, but let's face it, I'm going to wear it with black most of the time. I'm really happy with how this came out. I really like the neckline. We all know how I like a high neckline and a button-back blouse, so this is right up my alley, and I think it will be perfect to wear in calico. Barring all disasters, I should be getting back from my adventures here real soon, and I will be sharing some of that with you, or some of my travels with you here on the channel, hopefully. Hopefully I'll be able to get the kind of footage that I'm after, or I hope to. Who knows? This is me from the past, so I don't really know what's going to happen on this journey. I have a lot of things planned, but we'll have to see how it goes. But after that, I will be diving into a little bit more costuming, as I've said, for the rest of October, so hopefully you're looking forward to that. I know I am, because the silk came in the mail, and it is very pretty. Thank you, as always, for watching today, and I will see you again real soon. Bye.